The sound of breaking glass shattered the stillness of the Arizona night, jolting Hannah Lawson awake as surely as if someone had fired a gun beside her bed. She sat bolt upright, clutching the quilt to her chest, heart hammering against her ribs as the echo of shattering glass faded into the darkness of her small home on the outskirts of Agua Caliente. The year was 1878, and being a widow alone in the Arizona territory was dangerous enough without nighttime intruders. Hannah reached with trembling fingers for the loaded Colt revolver she kept in the drawer of her bedside table. The cold metal was reassuring in her palm as she slipped out of bed, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm armed and I know how to use this gun. Please, help," came a weak male voice from the direction of her kitchen. "I didn't mean to break your window. I'm hurt." Hannah hesitated, suspicion warring with compassion. In the 3 years since her husband Thomas had died in a mining accident, she'd learned to be cautious. But something in the stranger's voice pain, genuine desperation, made her decision for her. She lit the oil lamp beside her bed, keeping the gun trained toward the kitchen doorway as she moved forward. The golden light illuminated a man slumped against her kitchen table, blood seeping through the fingers he pressed to his side. His hat had fallen to the floor, revealing sandy brown hair and a face contorted with pain. "You're bleeding all over my floor," Hannah said, lowering the gun slightly but not setting it down. "Sorry, madam," the man managed, his eyes green as summer grass meeting hers. "Didn't have many options." Your place was the first with a light. Hannah noticed the small candle she'd left burning in the window, a habit she couldn't break since Thomas's death, as if the light might somehow guide his spirit home. Instead, it had guided this stranger to her door. "What happened to you?" she asked, setting the lamp down and approaching cautiously. "Got shot," he said through gritted teeth. "Some fellas took exception to me winning at cards, said I was cheating," he grimaced. "I wasn't," Hannah sighed. Agua Caliente might be growing now that the Southern Pacific Railroad was pushing through Arizona territory, but it still had the lawless edge of a frontier town. "Let me see," she said, professional instinct taking over. Before Thomas's death, she'd worked as a midwife and healer in town. Her skills hadn't been used much lately, but they hadn't disappeared. The man moved his hand, revealing a bloody tear in his shirt. Hannah set the gun on the table, out of his immediate reach but close enough for her to grab if needed. "You're fortunate," she said after examining the wound. "The bullet grazed you. It's deep, but it passed through clean." "Don't feel fortunate," he muttered, then offered a weak smile that transformed his face. "Though meeting a beautiful lady doctor might change my mind. I'm not a doctor, just a midwife." "And flattery won't stop this from hurting," Hannah replied, gathering supplies. "What's your name, stranger?" Garrett Rhodes," he answered, watching her movements with curious eyes. "And you are?" "Hannah Lawson, Widow Lawson to most folks in town." She poured whiskey onto a clean cloth. "This will burn." Garrett hissed when the alcohol touched his wound but didn't pull away. Hannah worked efficiently, cleaning, stitching, and bandaging his side. Her fingers moved with practiced ease, though it had been months since she'd treated anything more serious than Mrs. Peterson's sprained wrist. "You have a gentle touch, Mrs. Lawson," Garrett said as she finished tying off the bandage. "And you have remarkable tolerance for pain, Mr. Rhodes," Hannah replied, washing blood from her hands in a basin of water. "Most men would have passed out or at least complained more." "Had worse," he said simply. When he tried to stand, he swayed dangerously, and Hannah found herself supporting his weight, his arm heavy across her shoulders. "You're not going anywhere tonight," she decided, guiding him toward the small parlor. "You can sleep on the settee, and in the morning, if you haven't developed a fever, you can be on your way." "Thank you," Garrett said, his voice soft with gratitude and exhaustion. "I'll repay your kindness." Hannah helped him settle on the narrow settee, bringing a pillow and blanket from the chest in her bedroom. As she arranged the blanket over him, she noticed the fine quality of his clothing despite the trail dust. His boots were well made, and the silver buckle on his gun belt spoke of some prosperity. "Not a drifter then, or at least not a poor one. Rest," she instructed. "I'll check on you in the morning." As she turned to go, his hand caught hers, the touch light but surprising. "Mrs. Lawson," he said, his voice already slurring with approaching sleep. "I'm not a bad man, just so you know." Hannah gently withdrew her hand. We'll see about that in the daylight, Mr. Rhodes. Back in her bedroom, Hannah slid the revolver beneath her pillow and blew out the lamp. Sleep was a long time coming as she listened to the soft sounds of the injured strangers breathing in her parlor. It had been 3 years since a man had spent the night under her roof. 3 years of solitude that had become a comfort and a prison all at once. Dawn broke with gentle persistence, spilling golden light through the thin curtains of Hannah's bedroom window. She dressed quickly, pinning her chestnut hair into a simple knot at the nape of her neck. In the kitchen, she paused to inspect the broken window. It wasn't a large pane, and she had some spare glass in the shed that Thomas had left behind. Garrett Rhodes was still asleep on the settee, one arm flung above his head, the other resting protectively over his bandaged side. In sleep, the hard lines of his face softened, making him appear younger. Hannah guessed him to be in his early 30s, perhaps 5 years her senior. His face bore the weathered look of a man who spent most of his time outdoors, with laugh lines at the corners of his eyes and a small scar bisecting his right eyebrow. She moved quietly to prepare breakfast, but the clatter of the iron skillet against the stove grate roused him. He sat up with a groan, hand automatically reaching for the gun belt she'd hung on a peg by the door. "Good morning," Hannah said, cracking eggs into the skillet. "How's the wound?" Garrett probed his side gingerly. "Sore, but I've had worse sunburns. You do fine work, Mrs. Lawson." "Healing is what I do or did before." She trailed off, focusing on the eggs. "Before your husband died?" Garrett asked quietly. Hannah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Even after 3 years, the grief sometimes ambushed her, rising up when she least expected it. "I'm sorry," Garrett said. "Loss leaves marks deeper than any bullet." The simple understanding in his voice made her look up. He was watching her with those grass-green eyes, his expression unreadable but somehow kind. "Yes, it does," she agreed, placing a plate of eggs and bacon before him. "Eat. You need to regain your strength." Garrett ate with the enthusiasm of a man who hadn't had a proper meal in days. As he ate, Hannah noticed him studying her modest home, the faded curtains, the worn but clean furniture, the small shelf of books that had been her greatest luxury. "You live here alone?" he asked between bites. "Yes," Hannah replied, sitting down with her own plate. "After Thomas died, I stayed on. It's small, but it's mine, paid for. No family nearby, none. My parents are long dead and I was an only child. Thomas had a brother somewhere back east, but we never heard from him." Hannah poured coffee into 2 mugs. "What about you, Mr. Rhodes?" "Where do you call home?" Garrett's smile turned wry. "Wherever I hang my hat these days. I was ranching north of Tucson until about a year ago." "What happened?" "Drought, bad investments, the usual story out here." He shrugged, then winced at the movement. "I've been working as a cattle buyer since then, moving from place to place." Hannah studied him over her coffee cup. There was something he wasn't saying, but she didn't press. Everyone in the West had parts of their story they kept private. "Well, Mr. Rhodes, as soon as you feel able, you should be on your way. I have errands in town today." Garrett nodded, setting down his empty plate. "Of course, I've imposed enough." He stood, moving with careful deliberation. "Would you allow me to fix that window before I go?" "It's the least I can do." Hannah hesitated. The offer was tempting. The broken window would let in dust and scorpions if not repaired quickly. "There's glass in the shed," she said finally, "and Thomas's tools." Garrett's smile was warm. "Perfect, I'll have it fixed before you know it." True to his word, by mid-morning Garrett had not only repaired the window but had also fixed the loose hinge on her kitchen door and oiled the squeaky pump at her well. Hannah watched from the porch as he worked, his movements careful but efficient despite his injury. There was something compelling about watching a competent man at work, something she hadn't realized she'd missed. "Thank you," she said when he returned the tools to the shed. "That would have taken me days to get around to." "Happy to help," Garrett replied, reaching for his hat. "I should be going. Is there a hotel in Agua Caliente where I might get a room for a few days? I need to telegraph my employer before moving on." Hannah nodded. "The Desert Rose on Main Street. It's not fancy, but it's clean. Tell Mrs. Delaney I sent you, she might give you a discount." Garrett settled his hat on his head, tipping the brim to her in a gesture of old-world courtesy that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "I'm in your debt, Mrs. Lawson. If you ever need anything, I'll manage as I always have," Hannah interrupted, Unused to the idea of depending on anyone, especially a stranger, something flickered in Garrett's eyes, amusement or admiration. She couldn't tell before he nodded. I don't doubt it. Still, thank you for saving my life. Hannah watched him walk away, his tall figure straight despite the injury, until he disappeared around the bend in the road that led to town. Only then did she allow herself to acknowledge the strange emptiness his departure left behind. For 3 days, Hannah went about her usual routine, tending her small garden, mending clothes for extra income, and keeping her modest home in order. If her thoughts occasionally strayed to the stranger with green eyes and a gentle smile, she dismissed them as mere curiosity. On the 4th day, a knock at her door surprised her. She opened it to find Garrett Rhodes standing on her porch, hat in hand, looking considerably healthier than when she'd last seen him. "Mr. Rhodes," she said, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "I didn't expect to see you again." "I wanted to check that the window was holding up," he said, though they both knew it was a flimsy excuse, "and to bring you this." He held out a small package wrapped in brown paper. Hannah accepted it cautiously. "What is it?" "Just a token of appreciation. Open it." Inside the package was a beautiful bone-handled hairbrush with matching hand mirror, the kind of luxury Hannah hadn't allowed herself in years. "Mr. Rhodes, I can't accept this," she protested. "Please call me Garrett." "And yes, you can," he insisted. "It's not charity, Mrs. Lawson. It's thanks for saving my life." Hannah ran her fingers over the smooth handle of the brush. "It's Hannah," she said quietly, "and thank you, it's lovely." Garrett smiled, the expression warming his entire face. "I'm glad you like it. I also came to ask if you might do me the honor of having dinner with me tonight at the hotel restaurant." Hannah blinked, startled by the invitation. "Dinner?" "Yes, that meal people typically eat in the evening," Garrett teased gently. "I'm leaving tomorrow, and I'd like to part on friendly terms with the woman who stitched me up." Hannah hesitated. It had been so long since she'd had a meal in town, longer still since she dined with a man. The prospect was both appealing and terrifying. "I don't know," she began. "It's just dinner, Hannah," Garrett said softly. "Between friends." Something in his tone respectful without pressure decided her. "All right, Mr. Rhodes, Garrett, dinner would be nice." His smile broadened. "I'll call for you at 6 if that's suitable." Hannah nodded, a flutter of anticipation stirring in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. After Garrett left, she found herself standing before her small mirror, wondering what to wear. Her wardrobe consisted mainly of practical, serviceable dresses in muted colors. The black mourning dresses had been put away a year after Thomas's death, but she'd never seen the point in bright colors or fashionable styles for a widow living alone. Finally, she settled on a blue calico dress that Thomas had always liked, one she hadn't worn since before his death. As she pinned her hair, using the new brush that glided through her chestnut waves with ease, Hannah caught herself humming another thing she hadn't done in years. Promptly at 6, Garrett arrived in a rented buggy. He had cleaned up remarkably well, his hair still damp from washing, his shirt crisp despite the desert heat. When he saw her on the porch, he paused, appreciation evident in his gaze. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," Hannah replied, feeling unaccountably shy. "You clean up nicely yourself." The ride into town was pleasant, the evening air cooling as the sun descended toward the western horizon. Garrett was an easy conversationalist, sharing stories about his travels that made Hannah laugh for the first time in longer than she could remember. The Desert Rose Hotel's dining room was the finest establishment in Agua Caliente, which wasn't saying much by Eastern standards, but was impressive for a frontier town. Heads turned when they entered. Hannah was aware of the curious stares and whispers. Widow Lawson, dining with a stranger. "It would be all over town by morning. People are staring," she murmured as Garrett held her chair. "Let them," he replied, taking his own seat. "It's probably the most excitement they've had since the last stagecoach robbery." Hannah couldn't help but smile at his irreverence. "You don't understand. In a small town, reputation is everything. And dining with a gentleman damages yours." Garrett raised an eyebrow. "No," but Hannah stopped, realizing she was being foolish. "You're right, it's just dinner." The meal was delicious steak, potatoes, and fresh vegetables, followed by apple pie that almost rivaled Hannah's own recipe. Throughout dinner, Garrett kept the conversation flowing, asking about her life before Agua Caliente, her work as a midwife, her dreams before life had intervened. "You should practice again," he said when she described delivering babies. "Your eyes light up when you talk about it." Hannah sighed. "Maybe someday. After Thomas died, I couldn't bear it anymore being around new families, new life, when mine had been cut short." "I understand," Garrett said, his hand briefly covering hers on the table. "Grief changes us, but it doesn't have to define us forever." There was knowledge in his eyes that spoke of personal experience with loss. Hannah wanted to ask but held back. Instead, she changed the subject. "Where will you go tomorrow?" "North, to Prescott. The cattle operation I work for is expanding, looking for new grazing lands." Garrett studied her face. "It's beautiful country up there, cooler than here with pine forests and mountain streams." "It sounds lovely," Hannah said, a wistfulness in her voice she hadn't intended to reveal. "It is," Garrett agreed. "Perhaps someday you'll see it." After dinner, they walked slowly through town, the desert stars brilliant overhead. Hannah was conscious of Garrett's presence beside her, tall and steady. When they reached her home, he helped her down from the buggy with careful hands. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," Hannah said, standing on her porch step. "The pleasure was mine," Garrett replied. He hesitated, then reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face, his fingers gentle against her cheek. "I wish I'd met you under different circumstances, Hannah Lawson." The touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the night air. "As do I," she admitted softly. For a moment it seemed he might kiss her, and Hannah found herself holding her breath. But Garrett stepped back, his smile tinged with regret. "Good night, Hannah, and thank you for everything." "Good night, Garrett," she replied, watching as he climbed back into the buggy. Only when the sound of hoofbeats had faded into the distance did Hannah enter her home, which suddenly seemed emptier than before. Morning came, and with it the knowledge that Garrett Rhodes was gone, continuing on his journey north. Hannah told herself it was for the best. One dinner didn't change the reality of her life or his. Yet as she went about her day, every task seemed to remind her of him: the repaired window, the brush and mirror on her dresser, the lingering memory of his hand on hers. A week passed, then two. Life in Agua Caliente continued its slow, predictable pace. Hannah received more sewing work from the mercantile owner's wife and was asked by the town doctor if she might assist with a difficult birth expected in the coming month. Slowly, she was finding her way back into the rhythm of the community. It was nearly a month after Garrett's departure when Sheriff Mills knocked on her door one afternoon. The aging lawman looked uncomfortable, hat in hand on her porch. "Afternoon, Mrs. Lawson," he said, his weathered face creased with concern. "Might I have a word?" Hannah invited him in, anxiety fluttering in her chest. Sheriff Mills rarely made social calls. "What can I do for you, Sheriff?" she asked, pouring coffee for them both. "It's about that fella who was staying at the Desert Rose last month, Rhodes, I believe his name was." Hannah's heart jumped. "Yes, what about him?" "Got a wire from the sheriff up in Prescott. Seems Rhodes was involved in some trouble up there, a shooting. He was hurt pretty bad." The sheriff watched her face carefully. "I recall seeing you two having dinner at the hotel. Thought you might want to know." "Is he alive?" Hannah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Far as I know, yes, but in rough shape, according to the telegram." Hannah's mind raced. Garrett injured again, or still, if his wound had never properly healed. Alone in a town where he probably knew no one. "Thank you for telling me, Sheriff," she said. Her decision already forming after Sheriff Mills left, Hannah moved with purpose, packing a small carpet bag with essentials. The stage coach to Prescott left the following morning. She had just enough savings to cover the fare and a few nights' lodging once she arrived. It was impulsive, perhaps even foolish, but Hannah couldn't ignore the pull she felt. Garrett had entered her life by chance, but his departure had left a void she hadn't expected. She didn't know what awaited her in Prescott, perhaps nothing more than a chance to repay a kindness to a man who had briefly brightened her existence. The journey to Prescott was arduous, 2 days of jolting travel over rough terrain. Hannah shared the stagecoach with a traveling salesman, an elderly couple returning from visiting relatives, and a young mother with an infant who cried most of the way. Hannah helped with the baby, her midwife's instincts taking over, and the grateful mother blessed her repeatedly. Prescott was larger than Agua Caliente, its buildings more substantial, its streets busier. The territorial capital boasted proper hotels, a courthouse, and several thriving businesses. Hannah found modest lodgings at a boarding house run by a stern-faced widow named Mrs. Fletcher, who regarded Hannah's story of coming to check on an injured friend with obvious skepticism, but took her money nonetheless. Finding Garrett proved more challenging than Hannah had anticipated. The local doctor, a harried man named Peterson, initially refused to discuss his patients with her. "Are you family?" he demanded, peering at her over wire-rimmed spectacles. "No, but I'm the one who treated his first gunshot wound," Hannah replied, straightening her spine. "I'm a midwife and healer. I've come a long way to ensure he's receiving proper care." Dr. Peterson's expression softened slightly. "A professional colleague, then. Very well." He consulted a ledger. "Rhodes was brought in 2 weeks ago with a bullet in his shoulder. Nasty business. He developed a fever that had me concerned for a while, but he's improving." "Where is he now?" Hannah asked. "He was moved to a room at the Western Hotel 3 days ago, still weak, but insistent on not taking up a hospital bed others might need." The doctor shook his head. "Stubborn man." Hannah thanked him and made her way to the Western Hotel, a 2-story building on Montezuma Street. The clerk at the front desk was reluctant to give out information about guests until Hannah explained that she was there to provide medical care. "Room 214, the clerk finally said. "Though I should warn you, madam, he's not been accepting visitors. Even turned away the sheriff yesterday." Hannah climbed the stairs with trepidation, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake in coming. What if Garrett didn't want to see her? What if the connection she'd felt had been one-sided, a lonely widow's imagination outside room 214? She hesitated, then knocked softly. "Go away," came the gruff response from within. "I told you I'm not making a statement until my lawyer arrives." "It's not the sheriff," Hannah called. "It's Hannah Lawson." Silence, then the sound of movement. The door opened to reveal Garrett, pale and unshaven, his right arm in a sling, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Hannah, what in God's name are you doing here? I heard you were shot. Again." She attempted a smile. "I thought perhaps you needed someone who could stitch a straight line." Garrett stared at her for a long moment, then stepped back, allowing her to enter the sparse hotel room. It bore the unmistakable signs of a sick-room medicine bottles on the nightstand, rumpled bedding, the faint smell of illness hanging in the air. "You came all the way from Agua Caliente because you heard I was hurt?" Garrett asked, his voice rough with disbelief. He lowered himself carefully onto the edge of the bed. Hannah set down her carpet bag. "It sounds foolish when you put it that way." "Not foolish," Garrett said softly, "just unexpected and incredibly kind." Hannah moved to his side, professional instinct taking over as she assessed his condition. "Let me see the wound." With his left hand, Garrett awkwardly unbuttoned his shirt enough to reveal the bandaged shoulder. Hannah gently removed the dressing, revealing an angry red wound that was healing but still showed signs of infection. The doctor removed the bullet. She asked, probing carefully around the edges of the wound. Garrett nodded. "Said I was lucky. Again." "You need to find a new definition of luck, Mr. Rhodes," Hannah said dryly, reaching for her bag to retrieve clean bandages and salve. "Most men don't get shot twice in 2 months." A ghost of a smile crossed Garrett's face. "Most men don't have an angel of mercy who follows them across the territory, either." Hannah worked in silence, cleaning the wound, applying a poultice of herbs she'd brought with her, then rebandaging the shoulder. Throughout her ministrations, Garrett watched her face, his expression a mixture of pain and wonder. "Why did you really come, Hannah?" he asked finally, Hannah's hands stilled. "I don't know," she admitted. "It felt like the right thing to do. You barely know me. I know enough." She resumed her work, securing the bandage. "I know you're kind. I know you fix things that are broken. I know you make me laugh." She took a breath. "And I know that after you left, my house felt emptier than it had in 3 years. Garrett's good hand caught hers, holding it against his chest. Through the thin fabric of his shirt, Hannah could feel his heartbeat strong and steady. "I thought about turning back," he confessed. "Every mile north I thought about turning around and riding back to you, but what could I offer? A drifter with no home, no prospects." "I wasn't asking for anything," Hannah said. "Maybe that's why I wanted to give you everything." Garrett's voice was barely above a whisper. "When I took that bullet in the shoulder, all I could think was that I'd never see you again, that I'd never get to tell you." "Tell me what?" Hannah prompted when he fell silent. That one dinner with you made me happier than I'd been in years, that your smile haunts my dreams, that I think I could love you, Hannah Lawson, if you gave me half a chance." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Hannah felt tears spring to her eyes, unexpected and unstoppable. "You don't know me," she whispered. "I know enough." Garrett echoed her words back to her, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I know you're brave. I know you heal what's wounded. I know you've endured loss without letting it break you." His hand tightened on hers. "And I know I want to spend more than one evening in your company." Hannah wiped at her tears with her free hand. "You're delirious from fever," she said, attempting to lighten the moment. "Fever broke 3 days ago," Garrett replied, not letting her retreat. "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years." A knock at the door interrupted them. Hannah quickly stepped back, smoothing her skirts as the door opened to reveal a well-dressed man in his 50s. "Rhodes, we need to talk about," the man stopped, noticing Hannah. "Pardon me, I didn't realize you had company." "It's all right, Judge," Garrett said. "This is Hannah Lawson, a friend from Agua Caliente. Hannah, this is Judge William Porter." The judge nodded politely to Hannah. "Mrs. Lawson, I apologize for the intrusion. I was just finishing changing Mr. Rhodes's bandages," Hannah explained, gathering her supplies. "I'll leave you gentlemen to your business." "No need," the judge said. "I merely wanted to inform Mr. Rhodes that the charges against him have been dropped. The witnesses have corroborated his account of self-defense." Relief washed over Garrett's face. "Thank you, Judge. Don't thank me. Thank the bartender who came forward. He saw the whole thing, including the other man drawing first." Judge Porter nodded to them both. "Good day." After he left, Hannah turned to Garrett. "Charges? You were facing charges," Garrett sighed. "The man who shot me claimed I attacked him first. His friends backed him up." He shook his head. "Small town politics. He's the mayor's nephew." "What happened?" "The usual. Card game, accusations of cheating. When I got up to leave, he pulled a gun. I was faster, but not fast enough to avoid taking a bullet." Garrett grimaced. "Story of my life lately." Hannah sat beside him on the bed. "You need to find safer hobbies." Garrett laughed, then winced, his good hand pressing against his wounded shoulder. "Any suggestions? Ranching seemed to suit you," Hannah offered. A shadow crossed Garrett's face. "It did. I loved that land. 800 acres north of Tucson, good water, good grazing, but drought and debt." He trailed off. "Had to sell it all to pay what I owed." Hannah hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind since he'd first mentioned his former ranch. "Was there someone else? A wife? Children?" Garrett's expression softened. "No, never found the right woman. Or maybe never stayed in one place long enough to look properly." His eyes held hers. "Until now." The intensity of his gaze made Hannah's heart race. She stood abruptly, needing space to think clearly. "You need rest. I should go. Will you come back tomorrow?" There was vulnerability in the question that tugged at Hannah's heart. "Yes," she promised. "Tomorrow." Over the next week, Hannah visited Garrett daily, bringing home cooked meals to replace the hotel's bland offerings, changing his bandages and gradually learning his story. He had come west from Missouri after the war, worked cattle drives across Texas and New Mexico before saving enough to buy his ranch. The drought that had ruined him had been devastating, turning verdant grazing land to dust and driving him back to the nomadic life he'd led before. In turn, she shared more of her own past her childhood in St. Louis, her training as a midwife under an elderly French woman who had delivered 3 generations of children, her marriage to Thomas, who had brought her west with dreams of striking it rich. "He was a good man," Hannah said as they sat on a bench in the small park near the courthouse, enjoying the cooler mountain air of Prescott. "Not perfect, but kind. When he died, it felt like the future died with him." "But it didn't," Garrett said, his healing arm now out of the sling, though he still moved it gingerly. "You're still here, still living." "Existing," Hannah corrected. "Until recently." Garrett's eyes held a question he didn't voice. Instead, he said, "I've been thinking about what comes next. Now that I'm nearly healed." Hannah's heart constricted. She had been avoiding this very topic, knowing that soon she would have to return to Agua Caliente to her solitary life. "And what have you decided?" "That depends," Garrett said carefully. "On you." "On me?" "Yes." Garrett turned to face her fully. "Hannah, these past days with you have been the happiest I've known in years. I don't want them to end." "Garrett, let me finish," he said gently. "I received a letter yesterday from a rancher outside Prescott. He's offering me a job as foreman on his cattle operation. Good pay, a small house on the property. It's not my own ranch, but it's a start. A chance to put down roots again. Hope blossomed in Hannah's chest, though she tried to temper it. That sounds wonderful, you should accept. I will, on one condition. Garrett reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. That you stay here in Prescott with me. Hannah's breath caught. What are you saying, Garrett? I'm saying I love you, Hannah Lawson. I know it's fast, I know it's sudden, but I've never been more certain of anything. His grip on her hand tightened. I'm not asking for promises yet, just a chance. Stay in Prescott, see if what we feel for each other can grow into something lasting. Tears pricked at Hannah's eyes. I have a home in Agua Caliente. You have a house, Garrett corrected softly. Is it truly a home? The question struck Hannah silent. Her small house at the edge of town had once been a home filled with Thomas's laughter and shared dreams. After his death, it had become a shrine to memory, a place where she existed but didn't truly live. I don't know if I can start over, she whispered. You already have, Garrett said. The moment you decided to board that stage to Prescott, you chose to live again, not just exist. Hannah knew he was right. The woman who had impulsively traveled across the territory to help a man she barely knew was not the same woman who had lived in isolated grief for 3 years. What if it doesn't work between us? She asked. Then you'll have had an adventure, made a new start in a new town. Garrett's smile was gentle. But what if it does work? What if this is the beginning of something beautiful? Hannah looked around at the bustling town, at the families walking in the park, the women chatting on the boardwalk, the sense of community and growth that permeated Prescott. She could have a place here, a purpose. The town could use another midwife, she said slowly. Doctor. Peterson mentioned being overwhelmed with patients. Garrett's face lit up with hope. Is that a yes? It's a maybe, Hannah replied, but she was smiling. I need to return to Agua Caliente first, to settle my affairs, to say proper goodbyes. She squeezed his hand. But I promise to consider your offer very carefully. It was more than Garrett had hoped for. His smile was radiant as he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I'll count the days until your return. 2 weeks later, Hannah stood in the empty shell of what had been her home in Agua Caliente. The furniture had been sold, save for a few personal items she'd packed to take with her. Thomas's tools, his books, his favorite chair, all gone to new owners. It was strange how little it hurt to part with these things now. They were just objects, not the man she had loved. The house itself had been purchased by a young couple expecting their first child. Fitting, Hannah thought, that new life would fill these walls again. She had left them the recipe for her apple pie, written in her neat script, a housewarming gift from one generation to the next. Sheriff Mills drove her to the stage-coach station in his wagon, her trunks loaded in the back. Prescott's a fine town, he said as they traveled, growing fast. Good opportunities for a skilled healer like yourself. That's what I hear, Hannah replied. She had told everyone she was moving for the professional opportunities, not mentioning Garrett Rhodes. Let the gossips wonder. And that Rhodes fellow, the sheriff asked, his tone deliberately casual. He's up that way, isn't he? Hannah smiled. There was no hiding anything in a small town. Yes, he found work on a ranch outside Prescott. The sheriff nodded sagely. Good man, Rhodes, did some checking after he left, has a solid reputation among cattlemen. He glanced at her. Seems the sort who'd treat a lady right. I believe he is, Hannah agreed softly. The journey back to Prescott seemed shorter than her previous trip, anticipation making the hours fly by. When the stagecoach finally rolled into town, Hannah's heart leapt at the sight of Garrett waiting on the platform, hat in hand, fully heeled and standing tall. He helped her down from the coach, his hands lingering at her waist. Welcome back, he said, his voice husky with emotion. It's good to be back, Hannah replied, meaning it with all her heart. The small house on the Triple R ranch became their home, Hannah setting up her midwifery practice in a spare room. Prescott's growing population meant no shortage of expectant mothers seeking her services, and her reputation for skilled, compassionate care spread quickly. Garrett thrived as ranch foreman, his knowledge of cattle and land management earning the respect of the owner and the hands alike. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of their little house, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson, sharing the events of their day. It was on such an evening, 6 months after Hannah's return to Prescott, that Garrett took her hand and slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. "Marry me, Hannah," he said, his voice steady but his eyes betraying his nervousness. "Be my wife." Hannah looked at the ring glinting in the fading light, then at the face of the man who had brought joy back into her life when she'd thought it gone forever. "Yes," she whispered, tears of happiness blurring her vision. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were wed in Prescott's small church the following month, a simple ceremony attended by friends they'd made in town and a few of the hands from the Triple R. Hannah wore a new dress of pale blue silk, Garrett a black suit that made his green eyes seem even more vivid. "I never thought I'd find love again," Hannah confessed that night as they lay in the darkness of their bedroom, her head pillowed on Garrett's chest. "After Thomas died, I believed that part of my life was over." Garrett's hand stroked her hair, now loose around her shoulders. "And I never thought I'd find a woman who would see beyond the drifter to the man beneath." His arms tightened around her. "You're my home now, Hannah Rhodes." The name was still new, still a wonder to hear. Hannah Rhodes, no longer the widow Lawson but a wife again, a partner, a lover. "And you're mine," she replied, lifting her face for his kiss. Life settled into a rhythm of work and love and building a future together. Garrett continued to excel as foreman, setting aside a portion of his wages toward the dream of someday owning land again. Hannah's practice flourished, her gentle hands guiding new life into the world several times each month. It was after a particularly difficult birth, a breech delivery that had kept her away for nearly 24 hours, that Hannah returned home exhausted but triumphant. Garrett had waited up for her, keeping coffee warm on the stove and food ready for when she arrived. "Mother and baby both well?" he asked as he set a plate before her. "Yes, though it was touch and go for a while." Hannah sighed, rubbing her lower back. "But little Elizabeth Rose decided to join us just after midnight. 8 pounds of perfection." Garrett smiled, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You're amazing, do you know that?" Hannah leaned into his touch, grateful for his steady presence. "It's what I was meant to do. Bring new life into the world." A shadow crossed Garrett's face, so briefly Hannah almost missed it, but she knew him too well now, could read the subtle shifts in his expression. "What is it?" she asked, setting down her fork. Garrett hesitated. "Nothing, you're tired, we can talk tomorrow." "No, tell me now." Hannah reached for his hand. "Something's bothering you." Garrett sat beside her at their small kitchen table. "It's just seeing you come home after these births, hearing the joy in your voice when you talk about the babies." He took a breath. "It makes me wonder if you ever think about having children of our own." The question hung between them, delicate and weighty all at once. In the 10 months of their marriage, they had never directly discussed children, though Hannah knew Garrett would make a wonderful father. "I do think about it," she admitted softly. "Often." Hope lit Garrett's eyes. "Really?" Hannah nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "But I'm afraid, Garrett." "Afraid of what, love?" "Before Thomas died, I was pregnant," Hannah confessed, the words painful even after all these years. "I lost the baby 3 months after I lost him. The doctor said there was damage. That carrying another child would be dangerous, perhaps impossible." Understanding dawned in Garrett's eyes, followed by compassion so deep it made Hannah's heart ache. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "I didn't know how," Hannah whispered. I was afraid it would change how you felt about me, that you might want a different wife, one who could give you children." "Hannah." Garrett took her face in his hands, his touch infinitely tender. "Nothing could change how I feel about you." "Nothing, but you want children. I can see it in your eyes when you watch the little ones in town." "I want you," Garrett said firmly. "Children would be a blessing, yes, but you, Hannah Rhodes, are the greatest gift I could ever receive. If it's just the two of us for the rest of our days, I'll count myself the luckiest man alive." Tears spilled down Hannah's cheeks. "You truly mean that?" "With all my heart." Garrett brushed away her tears with his thumbs. "You can't carry my child, then you'll carry my heart instead. It's always been yours anyway." The love in his eyes was so pure, so complete, that Hannah felt her fears begin to dissolve. This man had chosen her, knowing she came with ghosts and scars. He had rebuilt her faith in love, in the possibility of happiness. "I love you, Garrett Rhodes," she whispered. "And I love you, Hannah Rhodes. Today, tomorrow, always." The months turned to years, their love deepening with each passing season. Garrett was eventually offered partnership in the Triple R when the owner decided to semi-retire, giving them a larger house closer to the main ranch buildings and a stake in the operation's success. Hannah's midwifery practice continued to grow, requiring her to take on an apprentice, a bright young woman named Clara who soaked up knowledge like a sponge. Together, they served the women of Prescott and the surrounding ranches, building a reputation that drew patients from as far away as Flagstaff. It was Clara who first noticed Hannah's fatigue, the slight pallor in her complexion, the occasional wave of nausea that would pass over her during their rounds. "Mrs. Rhodes," Clara said one afternoon as they returned from delivering twins at a farm 10 miles outside town, "forgive me for being forward, but have you considered that you might be expecting?" Hannah's hand flew to her stomach, her eyes wide with disbelief. "That's not possible." "With respect, madam, we've both delivered enough babies to know that sometimes the impossible happens." Clara smiled gently. "When was your last monthly?" Hannah calculated quickly, her heart beginning to race. 8 weeks ago, but I thought it was stress or age." At 38, she had begun to notice subtle changes in her body, had assumed they were the first whispers of the change that would come in time. "Perhaps," Clara conceded, "but maybe you should examine yourself as thoroughly as you examine your patients." That night, Hannah performed the test she had done countless times for other women, her hands trembling with hope and fear. When the results confirmed what Clara had suspected, Hannah sank onto the edge of her bed, overcome with emotion. Garrett found her there when he returned from the range, tears streaming down her face. "Hannah," alarm filled his voice as he knelt before her. "What's wrong? Are you ill?" Hannah shook her head, unable to speak through her tears. Instead, she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach, watching as understanding dawned in his beloved face. "Are you saying?" he whispered, awe replacing concern. "Yes," Hannah finally managed. "I'm with child, Garrett." Joy transformed his features, but it was quickly tempered with worry. But the doctor in Agua Caliente said, "I know." Hannah covered his hand with hers, both resting where their child grew. "It's a risk, a significant one. Then we'll find the best doctor in the territory," Garrett declared. "We'll take every precaution, whatever you need, whatever it takes." Hannah saw the fear beneath his determination, the same fear that coursed through her own veins. "I want this baby, Garrett, our baby, but I'm afraid." Garrett gathered her into his arms, holding her as though she were made of the most delicate porcelain. "I'm afraid too," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "The thought of losing you." "You won't," Hannah promised, though they both knew it was a promise beyond her power to keep. "We'll face this together as we've faced everything else." The pregnancy was difficult from the start. Hannah suffered severe morning sickness well into her 4th month, losing weight when she should have been gaining it. Dr. Sullivan, the specialist Garrett brought from San Francisco at considerable expense, ordered bed rest by the 5th month, when Hannah began experiencing concerning pains. Garrett was her constant support, rearranging his duties at the ranch to be with her as much as possible. He read to her for hours, brought her wildflowers from the meadows, and massaged her swollen feet with gentle hands. When darkness and fear threatened to overwhelm her, it was his unwavering faith that sustained her. "You're the strongest woman I know," he would tell her, his hand caressing the swell of her belly where their child grew against all odds. "You can do this. Both of you can." As her 7th month began, the pains increased, and Dr. Sullivan's expression grew grave during his examinations. "The baby is developing well," he told them, "but your body is struggling, Mrs. Rhodes. I must be honest, continuing this pregnancy holds significant risk." "What are you suggesting?" Garrett asked, his face pale with fear. "There are procedures." The doctor began delicately, "No." Hannah's voice was firm, her hand protective over her belly. "This baby is a miracle, our miracle. I won't give up on her." Her certainty that she carried a daughter was unshakable, though there was no way to know for sure. Garrett never questioned it, already speaking to Hannah's belly about the adventures he would share with his little girl, the horses he would teach her to ride, the stars he would name for her. By the 8th month, Hannah was confined entirely to bed, her body rebelling against the pregnancy it had been told was impossible. Clara moved into their home, monitoring Hannah day and night, while Dr. Sullivan took rooms in town to be nearby when labor began. It started in the deep hours of a February night, a hard, tearing pain that woke Hannah from fitful sleep. "Garrett," she gasped, clutching his arm. "It's time." What followed was 18 hours of the most difficult labor Dr. Sullivan had ever attended. Hannah's strength ebbed and flowed, her determination never wavering even as her body weakened. Garrett refused to leave her side, supporting her through each contraction, wiping her brow, whispering words of love and encouragement. "I can't," Hannah sobbed as dawn broke on the second day, her strength nearly gone. "I can't do it anymore." "You can," Garrett insisted, his voice hoarse from his own unshed tears. "You're doing it, Hannah. Our daughter is coming, just a little longer." "Mrs. Rhodes, doctor." Sullivan said firmly, "One more push. The baby is almost here." Summoning reserves of strength she didn't know she possessed, Hannah bore down one final time. The room filled with the miraculous sound of a newborn's cry, strong and indignant at being thrust into the cold world. "A girl," Clara announced, tears streaming down her face as she took the infant from the doctor. "A perfect baby girl." Exhausted beyond measure, Hannah reached for her daughter. The moment the tiny bundle was placed in her arms, a love so fierce it took her breath away flooded through her. "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Grace Rhodes." Garrett's face was wet with tears as he gazed at his wife and daughter. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice breaking, "like her mother." The next days were precarious. Hannah's body, depleted by the difficult pregnancy and birth, struggled to recover. Infection set in, bringing fever and delirium. For 3 days and nights, Garrett rarely left her side, alternating between caring for their newborn daughter and watching over his wife as she fought for her life. On the 4th day, Hannah's fever broke. She opened her eyes to find Garrett dozing in a chair beside her bed, their daughter sleeping peacefully in a cradle nearby. "Garrett," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. He was instantly awake, moving to her side, his face haggard with exhaustion and worry. "Hannah, thank God, Sarah." She asked. "Perfect," he assured her, taking her hand and pressing it to his lips. "Strong and hungry and beautiful, just like her mother." "I thought I might die," Hannah admitted, the fear of the past days still fresh. "I wouldn't have let you," Garrett said fiercely. "I need you, Hannah Rhodes. Our daughter needs you." "I'm still here," she promised, squeezing his hand weakly. "I'm not going anywhere." Recovery was slow but steady. By summer, Hannah had regained her strength enough to resume limited duties with her midwifery practice, with Sarah often accompanying her on visits, charming everyone she met with her father's green eyes and her mother's determined spirit. Dr. Sullivan, before returning to San Francisco, had confirmed what Hannah already suspected: Sarah would be their only child. The difficult birth had done additional damage, making future pregnancies impossible. But as Hannah watched Garrett teaching Sarah to toddle around their garden, his strong hands supporting her tiny ones, she felt no sadness, only gratitude for the family they had created against all odds. On Sarah's 5th birthday, Garrett surprised them both with the deed to 200 acres of prime ranch land west of Prescott. "Our own place," he told Hannah that night after Sarah had been tucked in with her new doll. "I've been saving, waiting for the right property." "Garrett, it's wonderful," Hannah said, studying the hand-drawn map he'd spread on their kitchen table. "But can we afford to build?" "Already arranged." Garrett's smile was triumphant. "The men from the RRR have offered to help raise the house as a parting gift. We can move in before winter." Hannah threw her arms around him, overcome with emotion. "Our own ranch, you did it." "We did it," Garrett corrected, holding her close. "Everything I am, everything I have is because of you, Hannah." The Rhodes Ranch prospered over the years, growing from those initial 200 acres to nearly 1,000. Garrett's innovative ranching methods and Hannah's continued service to the women of the county made them respected figures in the community. Sarah grew into a beautiful, intelligent young woman with her father's head for business and her mother's healing hands. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Garrett and Hannah stood on the porch of the home they had built, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold. Sarah was inside with her fiancé, a young doctor she had met while studying medicine in San Francisco, the two of them planning their upcoming wedding with joyful enthusiasm. Did you ever imagine this? Hannah asked, leaning into Garrett's embrace. His hair was silver at the temples now, lines of experience etched around his eyes, but he was still the handsome cowboy who had stumbled through her window all those years ago. Not in my wildest dreams, Garrett admitted, pressing a kiss to her hair, still chestnut though threaded with silver. When I was bleeding on your kitchen floor, I certainly never imagined standing here with you a quarter-century later. Hannah smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought them to this moment, the pain and joy, the challenges and triumphs that had shaped their life together. Remember what you said to me when I told you I couldn't have children? She asked softly, Garrett's arms tightened around her. That you'd carry my heart instead. And I have, Hannah said, turning in his embrace to face him, every day through everything. As I've carried yours, Garrett replied, his voice thick with emotion. The greatest privilege of my life. Inside, Sarah's laughter rang out, bright and joyful. Soon she would have her own home, her own family, her own story to write. But she would always be the miracle that had completed theirs. The daughter they had been told was impossible. As twilight deepened into night, Garrett and Hannah Rhodes remained on their porch, wrapped in each other's arms, their hearts still beating as one beneath the vast Arizona sky, each carrying the other's heart with the same tender care as the day they had first fallen in love.